Rain poured over an abandoned parking lot in Detroit. A young woman collapsed on the cold concrete, surrounded by men who weren't there to threaten her, but to make her disappear. A disgraced night shift cop and his K-9 were the last to notice. No backup, no protection. One choice that would cost him everything. What they uncovered wasn't random violence, but a silent deal hidden in the dark. And when the badge failed, only loyalty, faith, and a miracle remained. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe doing what's right still matters, subscribe. This story may restore your faith in miracles.
Rain slid down the empty streets of Detroit, blurring the streetlights into long, trembling lines of yellow, as if the city itself was trying not to look too closely at what survived in the dark. Detroit was a city built on quiet compromises, and Ethan Cross had learned that the hard way. At 34, he carried himself like a man older than his years, broad-shouldered but slightly stooped, as if habit had taught his body to expect weight even when there was none. His face was sharply angled, cheekbones cut deep from years of stress rather than age, with a permanent crease between his brows that never fully relaxed. A short, uneven beard shadowed his jaw, the kind that came not from style but from fatigue. Ethan was not unfriendly, but he had learned to keep his distance. Smiles had become rare, careful things. 3 years earlier, he had made a mistake. Not a greedy one, not a cruel one. He had trusted the wrong person during an investigation, believed a witness who spoke convincingly and broke convincingly under pressure. That trust collapsed a major case, sent a suspect free, and left a stain that paperwork never quite erased. No one ever said punishment out loud. They didn't have to. Ethan was reassigned to night shift where careers didn't end loudly. They simply thinned out, faded, and were forgotten. Night shift meant abandoned parking lots, empty industrial zones, streets where the city's official memory stopped caring. Ethan drove them all, night after night, hands steady on the wheel, eyes forward, listening to the hum of tires on wet asphalt. He told himself it was temporary, the same lie he had been telling himself since the transfer. Somewhere along the way, the lie had stopped hurting and started sounding reasonable. The only constant beside him was Rook. Rook was a German shepherd, nearly 6 years old, with a powerful, disciplined frame and a black and tan coat dulled slightly by age and weather. His ears stayed alert even at rest, and his amber eyes missed very little. A thin scar traced the edge of his left ear, a reminder of a training incident long past. Rook moved with purpose, but without wasted energy. A dog shaped by structure and loyalty. He was not aggressive by nature, but decisive. When Rook committed to something, there was no hesitation. Unlike people, Rook did not know Ethan's file number. He did not know what Ethan had lost or why. He knew only the rhythm of their nights, the tone of Ethan's voice, and the quiet rules between them. Rook walked half a step ahead during patrols, nose low, ears high, absorbing the city in ways Ethan no longer could. Where Ethan saw routine, Rook still saw information. Sometimes Ethan wondered if that was the real punishment. Not the night shift, but the slow dulling of his instincts. He had once been sharp, reactive, fully present. Now, he caught himself following procedure instead of purpose, letting habit carry him forward. It scared him more than he liked to admit. Rook sensed those moments. When Ethan's shoulders tightened or his breathing changed, the dog would glance back briefly, just enough to confirm his partner was still there. Not reassurance, accountability. They parked near another empty lot, rain tapping softly against the windshield. Ethan sat for a moment before stepping out, listening to the engine cool. The badge on his chest felt heavier than it used to, not because of pride, but because it no longer promised protection. He had learned that a badge could be a shield or a target, depending on who decided the rules that night. As they stepped into the rain, Rook moved forward, posture alert. Ethan followed, boots splashing lightly through shallow puddles. He didn't know yet that this night would be different, but something in the air felt tight, unresolved, and for the first time in a long while, Ethan did not look away from that feeling.
The call came through just after midnight, thin and distorted over the radio, the kind that never carried enough detail to feel safe. Ethan Cross listened without interrupting, his expression unchanged, though something behind his eyes sharpened. Possible disturbance. Abandoned parking lot off the industrial spur. Caller disconnected. No confirmation. He glanced at Rook, who had already lifted his head, ears angling forward as if the words themselves had weight. Ethan killed the engine 2 blocks out and rolled the rest of the way with the lights off, rain hissing against the windshield. The lot opened up suddenly, a wide slab of cracked concrete bordered by dead factories and rusted chain-link fencing. Streetlights flickered like they were deciding whether to stay awake. Rook exited first, muscles taut beneath his damp coat, nose low to the ground. That was when Ethan saw her. She was crouched near a concrete divider, arms wrapped around herself, soaked through, shaking so hard it looked painful. She couldn't have been more than 25, slim, average height, dark hair plastered to her face and neck, strands clinging to pale skin that had gone almost gray with fear. Her name, he would learn later, was Maya Reed. She looked up when she heard boots on wet concrete, eyes wide and glassy, not crying anymore. That told Ethan more than screams would have. People cried when they still believed help might come. Maya had passed that point. She tried to speak, failed, and instead glanced over her shoulder. The men stepped out of the shadows like they had been waiting for permission. 3 of them, all big. Not gym-built, but solid in the way men get when violence is familiar. They wore dark jackets heavy with rain, hoods up, faces half hidden. One was shorter and thick through the neck, jaw square and stubbled, eyes flat and unimpressed. He held a metal baton loosely at his side, the rain running down it in thin silver lines. The other 2 flanked him, taller, broader, hands already clenched, shoulders rolled forward like they expected resistance and welcomed it. Rook stopped moving. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He froze, weight shifting almost imperceptibly, reading them. Ethan felt the moment stretch, the quiet tension before impact. He knew this posture in Rook. It meant the dog had made a decision and was waiting for his handler to catch up. The shorter man spoke first. His voice was calm, almost bored. "This isn't your problem, officer." He said it like a statement of fact, not a threat. That was worse. Ethan noticed the way the man's eyes never quite settled on his badge. He was looking past it, at Ethan himself, measuring. Ethan stepped slightly to the side, placing himself between the men and the girl without making it obvious. His heart rate stayed steady, the way it did when something inside him had already decided. He could feel the old instinct stirring, the one he had been sanding down for years to survive night shift. He thought about the file that still followed his name. He thought about how easy it would be to call this in, to wait, to let someone else deal with it. Behind him, Maya made a small sound. Not a cry, a breath caught wrong. Rook moved. He surged forward in a clean, controlled line, teeth locking onto the arm holding the baton before the man could react. The metal clattered to the ground, sharp and loud in the rain. Everything broke at once after that. One of the larger men lunged toward Ethan, fist swinging wide. Ethan took the hit on his shoulder, pain blooming hot and immediate, but he stayed upright. He shoved Maya back toward the patrol car, shouting once, low and sharp, more command than sound. Rook held on, powerful and precise, dragging the shorter man off balance. The other attacker hesitated, just long enough to reassess, and that hesitation saved the night from turning worse. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone else had finally called it in. The men disengaged fast, retreating into the dark with practiced efficiency. No last words, no threats, just withdrawal. That scared Ethan more than if they had shouted. When it was over, Maya slid down against the car, sobbing now that she could afford to. Rook returned to Ethan's side, chest heaving, eyes still tracking the shadows. Ethan looked at the empty space where the men had been and understood, with cold clarity, that this hadn't been random, and that stepping in had changed something he couldn't undo. Ethan heard the baton cut the air before it landed, a blunt whistle swallowed by rain, and in that fraction of a second, he understood exactly which rule was about to be broken. Detroit lived on an unwritten pact. Night shift passed through, didn't interfere, didn't look too closely. Ethan had survived by honoring it, by letting the city keep its secrets. Rook shattered that logic with motion. The dog surged forward before any command left Ethan's mouth, 6 years of training collapsing into instinct, jaws closing on the wrist that held the metal baton. The impact rang sharp against bone, the baton skidding across wet concrete with a hollow clatter that seemed louder than the rain itself. The man with the shaved head cursed and staggered, surprise finally cracking his practiced calm. The other two moved at once, not reckless but coordinated, boots splashing as they tried to reform the shape of the trap. Ethan stepped into the gap Rook created, shoulder driving forward, forearm catching a blow meant for Maya's ribs. Pain flared hot and immediate, a white burst behind his eyes, but he stayed upright because staying upright was the difference between ending this and letting it end him. He felt blood in his mouth, tasted metal and rain together, and forced his feet to keep moving. Rook held on long enough to break the rhythm, then released and reset, body angled, teeth bared not in frenzy but warning, eyes never leaving the nearest threat. The dog's coat was slick and dark with rain, chest heaving, scarred ear flattened as he assessed distance and timing with a precision Ethan envied. Maya stumbled behind Ethan, breath ragged, hands shaking as she tried to stand without slipping again. Her fear was sharp but focused, the kind that knew when to follow and when to freeze. One of the men lunged for Rook and missed, momentum carrying him wide. Ethan seized the opening, shoving hard, driving him back into a concrete post with a grunt and the dull thud of flesh on stone. There was nothing cinematic about it. It was close and ugly and exhausting, bodies colliding in a space that smelled of wet asphalt and fear. A fist caught Ethan's cheek and he reeled, vision narrowing, but he felt the leash go slack as Rook repositioned, blocking the line between Maya and the remaining attacker. The man hesitated, eyes flicking from the dog's teeth to Ethan's bloodied face, recalculating the cost. That hesitation was everything. Ethan didn't chase. He planted himself, back to Maya, breath controlled by habit, and let the rain keep time while Rook held the perimeter. The baton lay where it had fallen, harmless now, reflecting broken light. In that stillness brief and brittle, Ethan knew the pact was gone. Not because he had decided to tear it up, but because something that didn't understand compromise had refused to step aside. When the men finally retreated, slow and deliberate, promising memory instead of surrender, Ethan felt the weight settle into his bones. He knelt beside Maya, voice low, steadying, while Rook stood guard, a living barrier that would not look away. Morning came thin and gray, as if Detroit itself were reluctant to look at what the night had left behind. Maya spoke in a small interview room that smelled of old coffee and disinfectant, her hands wrapped tightly around a paper cup she never drank from. Up close, she looked younger than Ethan had thought, mid-20s at most. She was slim, almost fragile in build, with narrow shoulders and collarbones that showed when she leaned forward. Her dark hair, once long, had been hacked unevenly just below her jaw, a practical cut made in haste. Her skin was pale, marked by faint bruises along one wrist she tried to hide with her sleeve. Maya's voice shook at first, then steadied as she forced herself through the truth. She hadn't been part of the underworld by choice. She had been used as a courier, moving information between people who never met face to face because she looked harmless and learned quickly when to keep quiet. The protection came from inside the system names she didn't know, uniforms she recognized. The night in the rain was the first time she tried to disappear. The three men weren't there to scare her. They were there to close the loop. Ethan listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. He had heard versions of this story before, always softened, always incomplete. What Maya said fit too cleanly with what he already knew. When she finished, he nodded once and stood, feeling the familiar weight settle behind his eyes. He told her she would be moved somewhere safe, knowing even as he said it that safe was a word with limits. By noon, the machinery had started grinding. Footage from the parking lot was suddenly unavailable. A technical glitch, someone said with a shrug. Ethan's report came back with revisions already marked, language softened, sequences reordered. No one accused him outright. That would have required courage. Instead, doors stayed closed. Conversation stopped when he entered the room. A sergeant he had once trusted, a tall, thick-necked man with iron-gray hair and a voice that filled space, met his eyes briefly, then looked away, choosing silence over loyalty without saying a word. Ethan understood the message. The system wasn't angry, it was correcting an imbalance. Rook noticed the change before Ethan fully did. On their next night patrol, the dog's pace slowed. He paused longer at intersections, nose lifting, ears swiveling with intent. Twice, he stopped completely, staring down an alley where a dark sedan idled with its lights off. When Ethan shifted, the car moved on. Later, the same vehicle appeared 3 blocks away. Rook gave a low, controlled huff, not a growl, but a warning meant for one person alone. The dog's behavior sharpened over the following nights. He tracked patterns Ethan had trained himself to ignore. Repeated footsteps, engines that started too quickly, silhouettes that lingered just beyond light. Rook was not afraid. He was methodical. Whatever instincts Ethan had dulled with compromise, Rook carried intact. Ethan began to feel it then, the absence where protection used to be. The badge on his chest no longer meant backup would come. It meant someone would recognize him, mark him, measure him. He stood one night beside the cruiser, rain misting his jacket, watching Rook scan the darkness with unwavering focus. For years, Ethan had believed survival meant staying small, staying quiet, letting things pass. Now he saw the truth he had avoided. The badge had never been armor. It had only delayed the moment when the city decided what he was worth. And that moment, he knew, was no longer far away. 3 nights later, Ethan returned to the abandoned parking lot without a call number, without authorization, without anyone who could be forced to look the other way for him. The rain had come back too, heavier this time, flattening the city into reflections and shadow. Only Rook walked beside him, leash loose, posture alert, the dog's memory sharper than any report Ethan had ever filed. The lot looked the same, broken lights, cracked asphalt, but Rook told a different story. He slowed near the concrete divider, nose tracing invisible lines, ears rotating with quiet precision. He remembered the men's scent, the cadence of their steps, the way they had formed a wall around Maya. When the engine noise reached them, Rook stiffened, muscles coiling beneath his dark coat. The 3 men did not hide this time. They stepped out of the rain with the confidence of people who believed the system had already chosen their side. One carried the same metal baton, shoulders squared, jaw tight beneath a week's worth of dark stubble. Another was broader than the rest, thick through the chest, his movements economical, eyes flat with certainty. The third lingered back, younger, less composed, rain plastering his hair to his forehead as he watched Rook too closely. Rook moved first. He broke left, fast and decisive, driving into the formation before it could close. Teeth locked onto a forearm, not tearing, not shaking, holding. The man screamed and went down hard, the sound swallowed by rain. The formation collapsed. Ethan stepped through the opening, body acting before doubt could catch up. He took a hit to the ribs that burned white, felt cartilage protest, but he stayed on his feet. He disarmed the man with the baton with a sharp twist and a short, brutal strike that ended the threat without spectacle. There was no anger in it, only an end. The third man hesitated, eyes flicking between Ethan and the dog, pinning his partner to the ground. That hesitation decided everything. He backed away, hands raised, rain running down his face as if the night itself were rejecting him. When the sirens finally came, they came clean. No detours, no convenient delays. Rook stood over the downed man until uniforms arrived, body planted, eyes fixed, daring anyone to disturb the scene. Evidence stayed where it fell. No hands reached in to rearrange the truth. By dawn, the network Maya had described unraveled. Names surfaced, phones rang, quiet favors burned out in the open air. Maya was moved somewhere safer than before, not because the system had grown kinder, but because it had been cornered. Ethan's outcome was simpler. There was no ceremony, no commendation. His file gained a line about poor coordination and disregard for protocol. Advancement was no longer mentioned. The badge stayed on his chest, but it no longer promised anything. He stood in the rain after it was over, breath shallow, ribs aching, watching Rook shake water from his coat. For the first time in years, Ethan did not feel smaller for what he had lost. He understood the trade clearly now. When people chose silence to survive, it had been an animal that refused to look away. Ethan lost protection. He lost the illusion of safety. But standing beside Rook in that empty lot, he knew with certainty he had not lost himself. Sometimes miracles do not arrive as thunder or light from the sky. Sometimes they arrive quietly, through a choice made in the rain, through a man who refuses to walk away, through a loyal animal who does not know how to betray what is right. Ethan did not gain power. He did not gain praise. But he gained something rarer, the courage to stand when silence would have been easier. And perhaps that is how God still works in this world, not by removing every storm, but by placing strength inside ordinary hearts when the storm comes. A steady hand, a faithful companion, a moment where fear is met with love instead of retreat. In our daily lives, we are all given moments like this. Not always dramatic, not always seen, but moments where we choose kindness over comfort, truth over safety, and faith over fear. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it with someone who may need hope tonight. Leave a comment below and tell us where you are watching from. We would love to know how far these stories travel. And if you believe that goodness still matters in a broken world, please subscribe to the channel so these stories can reach more hearts. May God bless you, protect you, and walk beside you through every storm you face. And may you always find the courage to stand for what is right, even when no one is watching.